John Garcia, I hope all is well. Welcome into the game in T-Town.
Doing well, Ryan. Appreciate you having me back on.
I got you. What's your day been like today?
A lot of phone calls. I've charged the phone up a couple of times. I just got off of 3 in a row before this. So the news is spreading. It's changing. It's really fun. It's election-style coverage leading up to tomorrow and through tomorrow. So it's definitely not boring.
Does it take any of the drama out because of the early signing period?
Yeah, there's no doubt it's a smaller pool, but it means that any little bit of information with any of these elite guys remaining, you weigh it that much more heavily as to where you might have blown some of those things off in December because there's so much going on volume-wise. Well, here, every item feels massive. So there's still drama. We don't know everything going into it, so it's still plenty fun, but it's definitely a little less hectic than December.
John, let me ask you, when you look at Alabama, give me a couple of names, and certainly I was looking at the website earlier, 247 Sports, BamaOnline.com. Give me a couple of names that you personally think Alabama can close in on tomorrow and get, at the end of the day, their signature to be a part of this signing class.
Yeah, we've said it the last few times we've been on. I think Alabama maintaining verbal commitments is going to be just as big a storyline as adding anybody tomorrow, especially with the news from today, right? Yabi Anoma in the transfer portal. Guess what? Bama's got an elite edge rusher committed in Chris Bogle, some similar qualities coming out of high school with the South Floridian. Holding on to him would be paramount, especially now, although hometown Miami giving him plenty to think about Florida in there as well. Byron Young on the interior of the defensive line. Maybe the number 1 or number 2 D lineman potentially in this class for Alabama. And obviously we know they got the number 1 player in the country, Antonio Alfano. So if this kid's anywhere close, huge pull for Alabama. Alabama's trying to hold off LSU, Mississippi State, and others for him. So I think that's important. But in terms of adding guys, Ryan, it's the same few. Ishmael Sopsher, another defensive interior guy. Henry To'o, the linebacker from California. And then, of course, the tight end from down here in coastal Florida, Brett Seither, who's been a late riser. He's going to pick between Alabama and Georgia. Those 3 potential additions are big, but I think just as big, again, maintaining the verbal pledges you already got on board, getting them to put pen to paper, and erasing that doubt that has made this signing day a little more dramatic than we anticipated.
All right, so let's get a couple of predictions. Chris Bogle, as you talked about, where do you think he ends up?
Hardest one to peg out of all of these names. I could see he's the only one where I could see him landing at 3 schools: Alabama, Miami, or Florida. His mom's on record saying she believes in the structure of Alabama in terms of his development. He's a guy who needs to add weight, things like that. So I do think that favors the Tide a lot, and obviously he's already verbally committed. But that hometown Miami push seems real. So I typically go to the hometown, but I think I'll stay away and say he sticks with Alabama. But it's very close. I mean, this is a kid who literally committed to Alabama minutes after telling somebody in the building he was going somewhere else. So this kid changes hands a lot. A lot of confusion, stress are the words we hear coming out of his camp. But I do think the structure of Alabama and mom help him stick with the Tide.
Henry T. is a guy that we're going to have to learn on the last name. I know you mastered it a couple of minutes ago. It just rolled off the tongue like you've been saying it for years. Henry T. Washington. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think Tennessee's a factor. Washington's definitely the top threat, and this is going to be a classic one, right? Do I stay home on the West Coast in the Pac-12, or do I go play SEC ball? And I think at his position, inside linebacker, and with the priority Alabama has at that position, missing on the number 1 linebacker and Nakobe Dean, all of those things spur into Henry T. Being the latest West Coaster Polynesian guy headed to Alabama. So start getting used to that name, Henry To'o. The future of Alabama linebacking.
Okay. You quickly become Henry T. As we'll look at that one, and hopefully we'll be able to master that. I remember looking at Tongo Valoa and saying, Lord knows there's no way. And now it just rolls off the tongue. So maybe you need to go over here to the B.B. Comer on the campus of the University of Alabama and take a Polynesian Samoan-type class just to make sure that I can get this Polynesian pipeline connected. Let's go to Ely for a couple of minutes. Certainly the baseball conversation's been there, but at the end of the day, where does this big back choose?
Yeah, Bama had him on campus this past weekend. I don't know if it was enough. And look, he may never play college football either way because he is a legit first-round outfielder as far as we know. But in terms of tomorrow and where he will sign, I think Clemson, Ole Miss are both trending in certain directions. Clemson over the last month or so, but in the last day or so, Ole Miss is starting to feel pretty good again. He's a Mississippi kid. That state is as wild card and tricky to recruit as any. I wouldn't rule out the Rebels, but the long-standing trend has been Clemson, the defending national champs, and I think that's probably where I would expect tomorrow. But again, 11th hour Ole Miss is something to be reckoned with.
Well, and John, I think when you look back, and this is part when you look at the early signing period, it was great for Alabama, and I think it gave Nick Saban the flexibility to make some moves because if you don't have the early signing period, I wonder how many of these moves, yes, and there were some of them elective by their part to go to, better opportunities or, a step up in coaching. But you have to go back and really have to wonder, would Nick Saban have locked up more of these guys? If it's not the early signing period, I don't think the flexibility is given to Nick Saban to make this many moves.
I agree. They locked in such a large number to where there was not a relaxation, but there was certainly relief. Some of those guys didn't have to sign early. If you're an early enrollee, yeah, you're going to sign in December. But those guys who aren't, they didn't have to sign. I think 15 of them were early enrollees, so 9+ didn't have to sign, and most of them still did. So I thought the staff closed incredibly well in December. We always assimilate Nick Saban with his February ability to close, and I think that will ring true again. And it did allow him to mess around with the staff and really be patient with it. Because Alabama have they even announced some of these guys yet? They've really taken
Not
their
one
time.
announcement. Not one announcement.
Yeah, they've really taken their time this time around. Those guys are all recruiting and helping out, of course, but they've really been patient this time around, and I think the early signing period was part of the reason that he could afford to do that.
John, I asked your colleague earlier, and I want to ask you the same thing for those people that were listening now in the 4 o'clock that did not miss that missed the 2 o'clock hour. Is there any way you see Alabama losing this number 1 spot?
No. Even if it's a quote-unquote loss or Bama loses the day tomorrow, I think that doesn't mean they're going to miss on every single kid, And so if they split some of these decisions, even the ones expected to lean a little bit more crimson, I think it's still very much an easy runaway number 1 class, mainly because the schools immediately behind Alabama aren't really in position to load up numbers-wise behind them like Alabama can. Georgia's number 2. They may not get 1 or 2 kids total tomorrow. So even if Bama doesn't get any more guys and Georgia gets 1 or 2, that gap is pretty tight, or it's pretty big, excuse me. So I think the schools behind them aren't in it for as many guys as Alabama is. So even if it's a less than Bama-like day, that number 1 spot is going to be near impossible to give up.
John, when you look at team rankings right now, Alabama number 1, Georgia number 2, Texas 3, Texas A&M 4, 5 Oklahoma, 6 LSU. Let's stop there. Out of tomorrow, which team can you see moving the most, either up or down?
I think Georgia has a lot of room to move down. There's a scenario where Georgia doesn't close with any of the guys they're in on, whether it's Seither, who we mentioned earlier. Kai Elam is a Florida legacy. A lot of people think is going to stay with the Gators. Mark Anthony Richards has more of an Auburn trend to him. They may not add one new prospect. George Pickens, the Birmingham receiver, is probably going to stick with Auburn. So Georgia, I think, can move down by default. Texas could be in a position to vault over them. A&M is going to close strong because of Jimbo Fisher. So I think Georgia could slide here a little bit there at the very end. But on the way up, on the other side of it, I think Clemson, if you do get Jerry and Ely, if you do close well, I think you can move up from 9 to 5 or 6 with a strong close, depending on some of those dominoes with some of the teams in front of them, like Oregon, Michigan, et cetera. I'm not expected to have huge hauls tomorrow. So I think Clemson could be a school that jumps up a little bit. Penn State at 10, Florida at 11, all potentially guys who are heading north, as well as some of these other schools just don't have the room to add. So it'll look bad for them, but in reality, those classes are almost done when you're talking about Oregon and some of these other schools. So again, another interesting element of where perception comes in, and how do you spin that? How do you move with that? But I think no matter what, Bama's number 1. Georgia probably slides regardless.
John, what's your opinion, your analysis of Iyabi Anoma?
I think he's such an interesting case. 2 years of football at the high school level, really raw, unknown potential. But when you saw him work, you were just the ceiling of his potential ability on the field was so intriguing that you had to go all in. Bama did. We did. He was like our number 3 player in the country in that cycle. But there's just so much you can't know in that short of an evaluation. And I think, you don't know about adversity. You don't know about X's and O's. You can't project some things. So I think this is kind of a blend of what makes this business so hard for coaches, for analysts, for people who are in the projection business, which is pretty much all of us in this wonderful sport. There's certain things that you really can't put your finger on, and I think he's showing us why it's hard at different points. Obviously, a ton of eligibility left, a ton of talent, great frame. So he's probably going to land on his feet somewhere, but you hope it works out for him. But it certainly, from a football perspective, makes you wonder about what Alabama is going to do. Chris Bogle, that much more important tomorrow. Finding consistent pass rushers, I think, for the first time in a while, going to be a bit of an issue for Alabama. So I'm very intrigued, maybe more so for tomorrow, if they could secure Bogle and what some of these first, second-year guys look like. Because Anoma was a guy who a lot of people, including me, thought was going to contribute more in 2018. So why didn't that happen? So there's so many different ways to look at it, but it is puzzling and intriguing all at the same time.
John, does this have a chance to be Nick Saban's best class? Can it be that part of that conversation?
Yeah, on paper, you hit on some of these guys who, you hold on to the verbals. So Byron Young, Keelan Robinson, Chris Bogle. You're going to lose Christian Williams, but that one is behind the scenes, has been done for a while. But if you turn that into adding a composite 5-star type like Ishmael Sopsher, adding a top 50 type in Henry To'o, and then maybe a surprise wrinkle because, number 1 classes are about quality and quantity. You get a Scyther who's a top 20 tight end, something like that. Now, all of a sudden, volume-wise, 30-member class, boom, your points are going to be as high as possible just because of how big the class is. And we know Alabama's not taking a lot of 2- and 3-star types. So all of that wrapped in together on paper, Nick Saban's got a shot at his best class ever on paper, which coming off of 13 staff changes in 13 months and a national championship loss, that's about as ridiculous as it gets in terms of Bama recruiting statistics. So there's a legit chance for the best class on paper all time at Alabama and potentially in the recruiting era. So the last 20 years of recruiting coverage, this could be the best ever. So tomorrow, again, a little bit more important, I think, than conventional wisdom would tell you.
Crimson and Blue Chips, the podcast page. Connect with him. Crimson and Blue Chips, CABC Pod. You can find John Garcia on the Twitter account at John Garcia _Jr. Available there. Be a great follow year-round, but a very important follow in the next 24 hours as we cover National Signing Day. John, let me make it the theme of the day today. We've been asking the questions. It's been a very big buzzword here on this program and on the social networks. Best high school player you ever witnessed in person. Who is it?
Yeah, it's a bit of a cheat for me because I get to go to some of these
Your
All-American
sample size is
games.
huge, yeah.
Yeah, so my sample size is quite big. And I think when you look at a production, a size, and a projection formula all together, Myles Garrett, seeing him in high school at 6'5", 270, chiseled, arms longer than vehicles, it seems like, explosive off the ball, 4'6", laser 40-yard dash. In terms of freaks and just scary potential, he was really one of the guys that I was literally just kind of, he makes you stop doing what you're doing to watch him. I would say him, Trevor Lawrence coming up the last few years. The first time I ever evaluated him, I literally knew this is the best quarterback I've ever scouted. And I told everybody I knew when he was a sophomore, this is the best quarterback I've ever scouted. It looks easiest, 6'6", 220. He can move. The release is just, it's butter. It's smooth. It's no big deal to him. And obviously that's panning out as well. So those two guys, it's kind of a cheat because of the All-American stuff, but I think they're both number 1 overall picks in the draft and just guys that we will always talk about for the rest of our football lives.
John Garcia, I appreciate you, man. As always, you're our go-to guy, and we appreciate you being part of the game. You can connect with him, John Garcia, on the Twitter account, straight up at John Garcia _Jr. Available there. 24/7 Sports, BamaOnline.com, and also CrimsonandBlueChips.com as well. The latest from the great Crimson and Blue Chips podcast and so much more available there. John, as always, thank you again for being a part of the show.
Ryan, thanks for having me. Appreciate you.